Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Premier Chelsea, your source for all things Premier League, but starting with Chelsea first. But today, we're going to be talking about something a little bit different than we normally do. I'm joined by Patrick McCreanor. I hope I got that right.
Yeah,
Um,
McCreanor, close enough.
McCreanor. And the funny thing is, he told me, but I butchered it anyway. I apologize. Patrick, welcome to the Premier Chels. Patrick is the CEO of SoccerEx, so we'll be talking about SoccerEx and the big event happening in Miami next week. But once again, welcome, Patrick.
Appreciate that. Good to have you.
Thanks for joining me. So let's talk about SoccerEx, the origins. I believe it's in the 27th year. Um, how did it start? What's it all about? And then let's jump into the event next week.
Yeah, sure. SoccerEx was started in 1996, so yeah, you're right. We're 27 years old now. I'd only just left school when SoccerEx began, and I'm now nearly 45, so been around for a long time. And it was started by Duncan Reevy and his wife Rita. Duncan was the son of legendary England and Leeds United manager Don Reevy, and the idea was that SoccerX was born to kind of bridge the gap that existed within football in terms of knowledge sharing, communication, networking, doing business, and looking at best practice in terms of everything from governing bodies to leagues to clubs and how to run successful organisations within football, and really to facilitate business within the game. We cover lots of topics. There are different facets to what we do in terms of the event, whether it's content, whether it's expo, whether it's social evenings. But it was all really just designed to bring the global football business community together, really. And we've now done Miami next week, as you touched on, will be our 50th event in 21 cities over the last 27 years, which is pretty incredible, really.
Yeah, definitely incredible. And I like that you said bring the business community together because for too long the sport was looked at, it's a sport and the business is kind of out of it, and the
Yeah,
business is not part of it. But it is a business. We've seen that in the last few years, even a decade, with not just the transfers, but with the commercial side of it. And as a Chelsea fan myself, I've been very well aware of it in the last year with the new ownership group and all the changes that have gone down
yeah.
outside and off the pitch. So yeah, totally makes sense. When did you join SoccerX, and how did you kind of come about into the role of being the CEO?
So I joined SoccerX nearly 4 years ago as head of sales and marketing. At the time, my background is commercial, sponsorship, sales. Essentially, was what I started doing 25 years ago or whatever. And after a couple of years, the owners decided that they'd like to take a more commercial approach to the business and offered me the opportunity to become CEO. And I was a bit of a reluctant CEO at the beginning. I don't enjoy spending too much time in front of Excel spreadsheets and working out budgets and forecasts and all of those things. But yeah, I mean, I love it. It's a real labour of love for me. And I think as a football fan for nearly 40 years and somebody that's got 20 plus years of commercial experience, it's borderline dream job territory, right? Because it combines my two favorite things. So yeah, been CEO 2 years this week, funny enough.
Well,
2 years ago.
congratulations on the second anniversary.
Thank you, we're still here.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure you'll still be there for a long time. It's actually an event and an organization that I personally, I got to be honest, wasn't too familiar with.
Mhm.
But I have to give credit to you and your team and the sales and marketing team because I have seen so much publicity over the last few months,
Yeah,
not just on social media, but even on LinkedIn. And that's credit to you and the team for identifying. Yes, we are about the sport, but we're also, like you said, a business, and LinkedIn is kind of like the platform for that.
yeah,
So uh, for next week's event, it is in Miami. First of all, why in Miami? I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear it from you.
sure. We're based in Miami now. Well, I'm not. I'm in the UK right now, but we're owned by a group who are based in Miami, and this will be our fourth event in Miami. The first one was in 2018 at the Marlin Stadium, and we've hosted there since. And I think with over the last few years, ownership aside, and being based in Miami, I think the explosion of soccer, certainly on the east coast of America, and from a business standpoint, if you look at CONCACAF are based in Miami, FIFA are now based in Miami. La Liga, Serie A, Premier League all have a presence on the East Coast, whether it's closer to you in New York, New Jersey, or in Miami, right? So there's been a natural growth there. The game is growing all the time in the States anyway, right? It's the fastest growing sport in the States by a fair distance. And
Yeah.
I always brag to people now that it's replaced ice hockey as the fourth most favorite sport in the States, which I think that was a huge achievement on its own. I'm not sure that it will ever unseat the NFL or the NBA or even MLB, because they've been institutions for a long time. But um, and I only see it going one way. I see it growing and going from strength to strength. If you look at the size of the country, the potential that is there. Yeah, so we started in Miami just after being bought by the organisations based in Miami. And yeah, we're really cemented there. It's pretty much home for us now, which is great. So there's a lot of buzz around the event next week, and Messi ending up in Miami has certainly not hurt us.
Yeah.
And we work very closely with Inter Miami and CONCACAF in Miami too. So yeah, it's all positive right now. Miami is almost weird for a European business. Essentially, Miami is almost turned into our flagship event, which is great to see.
Yeah, and I like that you touched on not just Miami, but beyond Miami and kind of the growth of the sport here in the US.
Yeah.
I moved to the US maybe 13, 14 years ago at this point. I moved for college. I grew up in West Africa and Ghana.
Okay.
And that was the primary sport. It was
Of
football, it
course.
was soccer.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's actually kind of how my friend and I, who started this podcast, got into Chelsea. And then I moved here, and I would find maybe a couple of people in college. I'd be like, "Oh yeah, Chelsea, United, or Liverpool." And over the last 5 years, it's been. I find more and more people. I go to a liquor store wearing my Chelsea shirt. This guy starts talking to me, and he's a Brighton fan. I'm like, Brighton in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Um, so you're totally right. And actually, even over the summer with the Premier League Summer Series, I was shocked by the turnouts, not just for Chelsea, but Newcastle, Brighton,
Mm,
and some of the other teams that you may not think that are spreading their wings, but they are, and that's great to
yeah.
see, because the U.S. is a big market, and the sport in itself is global, and we're seeing that right in the front of our eyes.
Yeah.
Um, about next week's event. So it's a 2-day event, starts on the 14th
Mhm.
and the 15th. Any particular events or talks or things that you may want to highlight?
Yeah, well, we've got a VIP networking reception, which kind of kicks the event off on the 13th. That's being hosted at the Regatta on Coconut Grove, which is an awesome venue. Then we kick off, as you say, on day one, on the Tuesday, on the 14th. It's really difficult. I had this conversation last yesterday, and usually it's really easy to pick up, two or three panels and say, oh, actually, these are the kind of highlights of our show. But we've got 130 speakers in
Wow.
in Miami next week, and I think 44 panels. I might be wrong. So lots and lots of content, whether it's Don Garber and Eddie Q talking about the Apple and MLS deal.
Right.
We've got the CEO of Serie A talking about the work that they're doing going into the Americas and the expansion of their brand. We've got League One talking about similar things. So lots of European partners of ours, La Liga and Panini, talking about their work in the Americas. We've got a brand building in the Americas piece with Bayern Munich and a few of the leading organizations and clubs in the Bayern, obviously doing fantastic work in the States, in addition to what they do around the globe. We've got a soccer pitch being built there. We've got activations. We've got freestylers. We've got probably the most media friendly event we've had. We've got 65 plus media outlets from Fox, from ESPN, from CBS, from Tudor, from the BBC, from Sky. SoccerEx TV will be there, which we're now starting to develop quite nicely. Yeah, lots of legends. We'll announce a couple of really exciting names over the weekend, which I'm really pleased about. Who'll be in attendance. So I think it'll be a really action-packed couple of days. I've told everybody to wear comfortable shoes. You'll cover a lot of miles, and but yeah, the content wise it's fantastic. The Premier League CEO, and if you look at the level of the kind of people that we've attracted from a speaker but also delegate perspective, it's pretty great, really. We printed 2,000 badges, and we've run out, so that's a great sign, I think. I don't know what we're going to do about more badges, but we'll cross that bridge when I get to Miami tomorrow.
Yeah, those are little details in the bigger, much bigger picture, but
It's a
and it's a
nice
good
problem. It's
problem
a
to
nice
have.
problem to have. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. No, definitely. Um, Patrick, I have a question for you, and I know we may not. And I don't mean to catch you by surprise, but
Mm.
for someone that's looking at this and is looking at the sport in this country specifically, and wants to get involved, right? Wants to get involved one way or the other, and
Yeah.
that's not playing. Um, can SoccerX help with that?
In terms of a career in the business,
Right, right,
yeah, for sure. I think we do a lot of work with educational institutions like the Global Institute of Sport or the Football Business Academy, the I Work in Sport conference, which is in Switzerland. So we always encourage routes into the game. That was one of my biggest things a few years ago. How do we show people there's a route to working in the game that isn't just playing the game, right? That's a
right,
difficult thing. But
right,
if you look at what we do, there are so many different facets to running a football club. You could work in sponsorship, you can work in coaching or nutrition or performance or the medical side or the finance side or the operational side. So there's so much you can cover. And we always attempted to use SoccerEx as almost a springboard for people's careers. So if you look at SoccerEx alumni have gone on to work for FIFA, they've gone on to work for UEFA, other leading organizations. They've gone to start their own agencies that are worth tens of millions of dollars. So I think absolutely, certainly, we would encourage anybody looking to break into a career in sport and in football in particular to come to our event, because in terms of building a network, it would take years to build the kind of network that you can build in a couple of days at SoccerEx. So,
right.
we're doing a lot of work with the local universities to give interns an opportunity to work at our event and to build their own networks very early on. So, yeah, absolutely. I think it'd be a great event for anybody looking to push forwards in their kind of sports career.
Yeah, and like you said, with the number of speakers, but not just speakers, also attendees, it's just a great opportunity to network and
For
learn
sure.
and listen and get your name out there.
Hmm.
Um, I do want to transition a little bit. I know we've been touching on the U.S. and the growth of the game here. It's only going to get better from here with
Yeah,
your event, obviously next week, but then with Copa America, with the Club World Cup, and finally the big one, the World Cup coming here in 2026.
yeah.
Um, what are your thoughts around kind of not just yourself and your organization identifying Miami as an opportunity for next week, but just the global organizations around the world saying, you know what, there is something happening in the US that we need to kind of capitalize on.
It's a huge opportunity over the next 3 years. I think it'd be crazy to think otherwise. If you look at any large scale event, wherever it is, there's opportunity, right? So whether you're getting involved in the infrastructure, whether you're helping to build the new stadia or training facilities, whether you're looking to facilitate commercial relationships and get involved in sponsorship, whether you run an agency and you work with players that are relocating or whatever, or you work in fan engagement, you're going to be busy there, in that kind of role. So I think it's going to be an exciting 2 or 3 years in the States and around the States, including Mexico and
Yeah.
surrounding countries as well, right? So I think all eyes of the world gravitate towards the World Cup, and it's going to be really interesting because it's a long time since '94. Lots have changed in the US in terms of not just the playing style and standards, and the level of the US national team is way higher than ever
Right.
before. And, I was at the USA versus England game at the World Cup last year in Qatar, and USA were way better than England and should have probably won. So I
Yeah.
think there's an incredible amount of opportunity for organizations and individuals to really kind of get some skin in the game in the US over the next 3 years, because there's lots of work to do, but there's a serious amount of potential.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, and I'm actually looking forward to not just all of these events, but preseason events, and actually been to a couple of Chelsea smaller fan engagement events. So it is a recognition of the European clubs and just the world in general that there is an opportunity here, not just financially or commercially, but also just to spread the brand and spread the word and gain more followers and
Yeah,
ultimately grow the sport, which is, in my opinion, the best sport in the world.
of course.
Even though I live in the U.S. and we've spoken about NFL and NBA. Um, Before we move on, you mentioned a couple of legends. I'm not going to push you on who it is and if you can drop any names. But you did mention Messi, and I don't know if he's maybe going to be there, maybe not. I'm not going to ask you to deny or confirm, but he is having like a celebration, I believe, next weekend. At Inter Miami celebrating his eighth Ballon d'Or.
Yeah,
Are you going to be attending that?
I think so.
Okay.
I think that's just before I fly home.
Yeah,
So obviously home in the UK at the moment, but yeah, we're there for a week or so. So yeah, I'll try my best to. Yeah,
yeah, that'll be a good way to kind of round off the trip.
yeah, I
Um,
think so.
All right, I want to transition over. I know just have a few minutes left. You shared with me you were not a Chelsea fan before we started the podcast.
Yeah,
You
this is
are.
where your viewers might turn off, Raul.
No, we like to engage with other fans because that's what keeps it interesting, right? So,
Yeah.
Patrick is a Liverpool fan and has enjoyed the last few years with Liverpool winning the league and the Champions League and things like that.
Mhm.
What have you made of them this season?
Um, Kind of a mixed bag. I think the evolution of the midfield was the biggest thing. I think for Liverpool, we lost lots of experience, whether it was Jordan Henderson, James Milner, Ginny Wijnaldum left the year before,
Before, yeah,
Oxlade Chamberlain left, Naby Keita left. So there was just a big gaping hole. I think the recruitment's been very good. I love Alexis McAllister, a really good player, World Cup winner. I like Ryan Gravenberch from Ajax. I've got friends at Ajax who speak incredibly highly of Ryan and his potential and ceiling. So I think the recruitment's been pretty good overall. I think there's been flashes of a kind of Jurgen Klopp 2.0, and then a really poor result at the weekend away at Luton, not a good performance, and then an even worse performance last night to lose against Toulouse in the Europa League. So I'm quite excited. It's quite a young squad now. There's a lot of young players, especially in the midfield area, and I think there's probably room for one or two more, maybe a big enforcer, number six type player that they're kind of missing. And I'd like to see some strength added on the left hand side of defence. But otherwise, I think they'll always score goals. I've got a really good front line. I think at the moment it's going to be consistency, which is the hardest thing to find in football,
right.
as you'll know. And one week we look really good, and then the next week it's like, oh, it's still a work in progress. So um, cautiously optimistic about the season. I think if you offered me a top four finish and a Europa League final in Dublin for me to enjoy with the family and friends, I'd probably take that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you mentioned that number six, so kind of that enforcer in midfield, and
Mm,
obviously we know both our clubs were in for a player over the summer that it ended up working out for me.
yeah,
Um, but I do believe there is the appetite from Liverpool to maybe go back next summer for someone of that frame or that mold and fill that gap because you're
yeah,
right, they did bring someone in, but it's not what you'd expect for Liverpool as at least long term.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like whenever we play each other, it's always a draw. Um,
Always.
always, and then regardless of what competition it is.
Yeah,
But I do enjoy our games, and it's interesting because Liverpool have kind of been that force or that team that we've always wanted to become and stop in the last few years.
mhm,
But our games are always entertaining and fun.
yeah,
In terms of predictions for this season, I think you said top four in the Europa League final. Do you think you
yeah.
could push maybe a little bit further and get to closing down the gap between yourself and Man City?
I think it's going to be really difficult to do that. They're just a winning machine with the most successful manager in recent history, certainly, maybe ever. Obviously, great financial support, but even away from that, their recruitment is very good. That
Smart,
they
yeah,
very smart recruitment, and they get players that you think are at the peak, and then you think actually they're getting better.
right,
I just They just pick up points at such a ridiculous rate. It used to be where if you drew a game on a Saturday away from home and you think, oh, that's not too bad. Now draws almost feel like defeats because they'll win 10 or 15 games in a row and suddenly be 10, 12, 14 points clear. So I think it's difficult. I think I'd like to think so. I think if there was that midfield player brought in and a bit of additional ambition shown by the owners there, that would be great. Um, But again, then as you've seen at Chelsea, you need time for new players to bed in, and sometimes that takes longer than fans want. And it's so difficult to juggle a complete overhaul of a squad and then expect them to become best friends and great teammates immediately. It's almost impossible to do that. Yeah, I think we're good enough to finish second. I just don't think we're good enough to win the league this year, if I'm honest. I think next season, when the squad have been together for a year or so, maybe I think we'll go a bit closer.
Yeah. You mentioned Chelsea. We spoke about Man City a little bit. They two play each other this weekend. So I'm
Yeah,
hoping Man City start their 10-15 game run after this game.
sure. Yeah,
Um, but I don't want to be too negative about my team. um, but any teams that have surprised you? I know we're about to wrap it up, but any teams that have surprised you this season and anything
I
in
think
particular?
I think Aston Villa have started very well. I know they had a bit of a knock on the weekend. Unai Emery, fantastic coach with a brilliant European pedigree with Sevilla, doing a great job. Good recruitment over the summer. Brighton, as always, performing at an incredible level now in the Europa League as well as the Premier League. So I think they're doing well. I think everybody's been surprised by the start that Tottenham have had. Personally, I think they've had a fairly favourable start to the season. I think it's been, I wouldn't say fortuitous. They're playing good football, quite
Yeah.
aggressive and attacking minded. But yeah, I think Aston Villa probably number one for me in terms of the surprise teams, and Brighton probably a close second. I think.
Yeah, and those two teams just kind of show what a good manager, organization, and kind of believing in the project can
Yeah.
do for you. So yeah, I agree with you. And yeah, Tottenham. We saw how that went on Monday. I'm not going to say too much about it, but all
Yeah.
their good fortune did end in one night, which for me worked out.
Yeah, yeah. In
um,
about the last 15 minutes.
yep. But no, Patrick, I do appreciate you joining me. Thanks for your time. I know
Yes, well.
you have a lot going on, and like you said, you're flying out tomorrow to Miami.
Mhm.
So once again, thank you for your time. Good luck with the event next week. I'll be hopefully joining you there, and if not, then I'll be supporting from New Jersey. And any parting thoughts from you?
No, just in the back of my mind are how many things I've got to do before I can even pack a bag this evening, and obviously it's already 5:30, so it's going to be a late one, I think.
Yeah, I'll let you go. That wraps it up, guys. Thank you very much for listening. Please continue to subscribe, like, and follow us. It's at the Premier Chels on all podcast providers, Instagram and on Twitter. It's at Premier Chels, and do also follow SoccerEx. They're, like I said, on all social media as well as LinkedIn. But we will be back with a new episode. But until then, stay safe and up the Chels.